Hi, this is Diana Pepper at Tree Frog Farm. This section is about intuitive choosing of the flower essences for your clients. We'll be working with kinesiology. I'll show you different ways of doing that with your hands. And then also we'll be working with pendulum. So the first thing to know, no matter which way you're doing it, is the questions that you ask. It's very, very important. How you ask the question is very important. It needs to be a very simple yes, no question. Multiple choice doesn't work. So if you're asking, does my client need this essence? Does my client need lady's mantle essence? Does my client need meadow rue essence? If you go, which of these essences in this box, in all of these boxes, does my client need? You're not going to get a good answer. It's going to be mush because there's some yeses, there's some nos, there might be even some maybes in there. And so you need to be very, very, very specific. Asking a question that is, and you can use this for yourself as well. So when you're checking essences for yourself, it would be, do I need red alder tree? Do I need red huckleberry right now? Or if you're making a formula for yourself, is it, do I need this now? Do I need this later? So you need to be very, very clear. So the assumption is when you're working with your client that you're making a formula that's going to last for a period of time. So when you're asking, does my client need lavender flower essence? The assumption is, and you need to make this really clear in how you're holding it within yourself and framing it. Does my client need lavender flower essence for this dosage bottle we're preparing? Does my client need Michaelmas daisy for this dosage bottle that we're preparing? Now, after you've been doing this for a while, you may not need to say this in such concrete language, but at the first, it's very important to make sure that you're clear and that the body-mind, that your body-mind knows how to process that information. It's electrical, and it needs to be able to know which circuitry to use to do this. So the way the question is framed, the time frame, how it's stated, how it's done, as far as very simple choices, yes, no choices. If you need to do it, it's a series of yes, no choices. Some people will go, does my client need anything in this box? Yes, no. Okay, if you get a yes, then my client needs something from this box. Does my client need licorice? Yes, no. Does my client need lily of the valley? Yes, no, etc. So you can frame it in bigger quantities and then narrow it down. Working with the pendulum, the first thing is to make sure that you get a pendulum that is resonant with you. Not every pendulum will work for you, so as you're choosing a pendulum, feel it, talk to it, express it. The first way to start is to ask it, and see, you can see my pendulum's already responding. The first question to ask it is, what is a yes? And for me, with this pendulum, that is a yes. The second question is, what is a no? See, it was already anticipating me, so that's a no. And the next question is, what is an unsure or maybe? And that's an unsure or maybe. Not every pendulum will do that in the same way. For some, this way is a yes, and for some, that way is a no. It just depends on how the pendulum works within its own self and how it interacts with you. So someone else can pick up this same pendulum, and it may not respond in exactly the same way. So again, like we talked, let me just say one other thing here. Pendulums often come with a fairly long strand between what you hold and the actual pendulum that moves. And it takes longer for the pendulum to move around in a circle or a line when you have this much length. So I tend to hold it tighter so that it can move in a closer circle, and it moves more quickly that way. If you're not familiar with working with a pendulum, you may not get this amount of movement. I've been doing this for a long time, and this pendulum and I are very familiar with each other. So let's just show them a new one. If you're a new person and you're trying to get a yes, it may look more like that. It may look very tiny, like that. So don't be surprised if yours doesn't look like mine does. Okay. The way we talked about questions, asking the questions, is very pertinent here. If I say to this pendulum, how many essences from this amount of essences will my client need from this box? All these boxes. It's going to go, I don't know. If I say, are there essences in this box that my client needs? It's going to say yes. And I can ask, does my client need all of these essences? And I get a no. So then I go specific. Does my client need twin berry? Yes. Does my client need twin flower? No. Does my client need valerian? No. Does my client need vine maple? No. Does my client need western columbine? Yes. Does my client need western hemlock tree? No. So then I'll know to leave these up for when I'm making the dosage bottle. Then I do that for each box, each essence in the set. When I first started working with the pendulum, I would check things like what clothes to wear for that day, like what would be resonant and what color would be useful for what I was going to be doing that day, for the type of client work I was going to be doing, or if I was going to be doing something business planning, if it made a difference on the color I was wearing. I would check myself for ingredients for my food, that kind of thing. And can I tell one little story on myself? This applies to both muscle testing with your hands and with the pendulum. So I would check myself after, this is when I was first learning, I would check myself after dinner for a little piece of chocolate, and I would get yes. And I'd get yes. And then the next night I'd get yes. And the next night I'd get yes. And one night I got no. And I was like, what do you mean no? Hey, what happened to my chocolate? You know, and I could not make it say yes. And then I realized, oh, that means that I'm clear. So one of the things you need to watch for when you're working with either with a pendulum or with muscle testing, any kind of intuitive choosing, is, are you throwing it? Are you throwing the answer? By your desire to have a specific outcome, are you creating the answer that you want? So whenever you're doing this, you need to make sure you're really neutral about what comes out. And when that happened with the chocolate, it was like, well, I guess I'm clear because I can't make it say what I want. Now we're going to do the same thing with muscle testing with your hands first. We'll talk about that. Okay, so there's a lot of different ways to do this. There's, first of all, the circuitry in the hands is what you're working with. So, mostly the knuckles, and in this method, the fingertips. So, if you ask a yes question, do I need this essence? And you go like this, and it's strong. That means yes, for most people. So that's, again, the thing you need to ask ahead of time is what's yes and what's no. Usually this is a yes, usually that's a no. Usually this is a yes, that's a no. It pulls through. The circuit in this hand doesn't stay strong. Another way to do that is to do this, which I think is totally amazing. If it's smooth and the fingers move easily, that's a yes. If it's a no, for somehow the chemistry and the energy fields shift and it gets really sticky and it's very hard to move it. There's a whole variety of things that you can do. The main one I want to focus it on is working with your like your muscle testing of your hand, your arm, but you're using your hand. So if you've gone to like a practitioner that's like a naturopath or a holistic dentist or something like that, they will, like the naturopath would usually have you hold a bottle to your chest and or your solar plexus and say, okay, do I need this supplement? And then they'd put their hand on your wrist and the circuits in the shoulder, and if it stayed strong, that would be a yes, that you need that particular supplement. If the arm drops down, if the circuitry in the shoulder lets go, then that means that you don't need that supplement. That's a no. That's generally how it works for people. Again, double check at the beginning, is that a yes, is that a no? Now you can do that with your clients if you want, but that's really cumbersome, especially if you're working with a lot of bottles. So I've learned how to do it with my hands. And someone showed me this one day, and it was just like, as soon as I saw it, it's like, that's the way I want to go. So this is, your index finger is like the arm, and the pad on your middle finger is like the practitioner's hand. And so the circuit's in the knuckle. And so you would ask, like, let's say that you're checking for yourself, it would be, do I need Western Columbine? And the answer is yes. I need red clover, and the answer is no. If you're checking for your clients, then you don't have to pick up every single bottle. If you want to, you can. If you feel like, well, let me just show this. If you can just touch the bottles and go, Purple Passion Rose. Again, every time you're doing this, you go, does my client need this for the essence formula we're making? Purple Passion Rose, no. Rattlesnake Plantain, no. Red Olive Tree, yes. Red Clover, no. Red Elderberry, no. Red Honeycomb, yes. Red Huckleberry, no. Red Ocean Dogwood, no. Red Shisama, no. Red Super Gossamer, no. Red Scampi, yes. Do you see what's happening? Okay. Now, if you feel like you can't discern the difference between the essences, then pick it up and hold it and ask the question each time. And sometimes, when I'm talking to a client, if it's really a little bit fuzzy, then I will do that. I'll redefine what I'm asking and actually pick up the essences each time. Pick it up and ask the question. And then I'll also check below it and above it to see if maybe the fuzziness is I've missed something above it or I need something below it. But define it by the touch or holding it in your hand. Again, this takes practice, and you'll probably see other ways of working with your hands, but the primary understanding behind it is always the same, the simple yes-no question, keeping your own opinions and your desires out of it, being neutral about the outcome, and really defining the time frame of what it's going to be when you're asking the question. We did that happened a lot in the last class, where there was people that were not defining the time frame and they were getting mushy answers. So that's really important part of it. And unless you have other questions, that's all for now.